Ja, inte så segt på mina restresurser. Så därför så kommer vi att använda lite hjälp när det gäller resten när vi väl kommer igång. Och we are of course delighted to welcome Mrs. Marion Hopkinson for fifth time. Is that so? Let's hope it's not the last time. And anyone interested in Labradors cannot fail to admire and notice the enormous influence of the Rocheby kennels. For those of us who have had the opportunity to see Labradors in other countries except Sweden and the UK, the name Rocheby drops out in almost every country of the world and is certainly one of the most influential kennels of our time, and strongly connected with quality Labradors. And Marion, could you please start off by explaining why you've chosen this heading? Is Rocheby a kennel or simply a collection of dogs? Is there a hidden message here?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming. Yes, there is a... Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Is that better? Okay. There is a bit of a connection there, because I think we're all in this modern era trying to keep our type and our lovely dogs that we have known. But now we have the influence of all this easy transport around the world, and AI and everything else that's come upon us quite heavily in the last 10 years or 20 years at the most, with all this transient of new blood. Now, have we got a kennel, or are we making a collection? Because we don't really know.
I'm sure we will know the answer to that at the end of your presentation. And could you please perhaps start off by telling us a little bit of your start in dogs and why Labradors became such an important part of life?
Yes. My start in dogs, I'm afraid I was a very rebellious child. I was not an easy child at all. I had a brother who is still lovely and was a perfect child. I was an absolute horror. I have to tell you, at the age of 7, I stole a dog. I did. I'm reminded of it many times by my family. Pedigree dogs were not the norm when I was a little girl. Everybody had a little sort of crossbreed. And in the posh houses that were very close to us, but there was a field separating us from the higher end of the village. But there was a lovely brown and white dog that used to come into the field, and I used to go into the field to pat the local gentry's horses, because I was very much an animal child. I wanted animals. Anyway, this brown and white dog came every day to see me when I was patting the ponies and the horses. And so I enticed this brown and white dog, and I took it into my father's garage. And I closed the doors and I kept it there. And I fed it on cornflakes. Until this lovely brown and white dog, which turned out to be a very expensive Springer Spaniel, howled in the middle of the night because obviously it didn't like being fastened into a garage and being fed on cornflakes. And so I was duly then had to take this dog. We had to find out where it lived, and of course it lived in the posh houses. And I was escorted with the dog, and I made to hand the dog back, and I didn't really want to hand it back, but I did. And quite honestly, that was my first effort at having a dog. My parents were not, as you can gather, were not animal people. They were quite professional. And so animals were well out of the question because they both were working. So that was that. You can't have a dog when you're working. Well, we all know that scenario, don't we? However, when I was 9, I then purchased a dog from the local pound, all by myself. You can see what a horrible child I was. I walked 3.5 miles down into the local town and purchased a mongrel for 2 shillings and 6pence. And I was given it on a piece of string and a sort of collar, and I walked the 3.5 miles home. And this was my first dog. I think she had fleas because my father put her in the bath as soon as we got home. But she stayed. They realised that this awful child was just going to keep bringing animals into the house. So Dandy, as we called her, stayed. I then progressed to a German Shepherd when I was 16, and I did serious working trials with her. Loved it. In those days, the Alsatians, we called them Alsatians. I belonged to the British Alsatian Association. When I was 21, I was a young bride. See, I've been rebellious all my life. I was a very young bride, much to everybody's disgust. And at 21, I had my first baby and decided my old German Shepherd couldn't be replaced by another German Shepherd because the temperament wasn't reliable. And so I chose the Labrador. So when I was 21, I had my first baby and my first Labrador. And that is how it's remained. The passion has been there ever since. Loved it, loved the dog, loved everything about it. It was so sweet, kind, and able, and I was passionate in those days to be told how to train this dog to retrieve and go on the shoots and watch everything that the Labradors would do. And so that was my introduction to the breed. And I'm grateful for it because I came to the best breed in the world, in my opinion, and I still think the same applies. I don't think there's another one in the world that can do what the Labrador does.
But tell us a little bit about early days, the early dogs that impressed you,
Okay.
when you started breeding and showing Labradors.
Yes, I was in a little village called Furbeck, which is where I had my first Labrador, and I purchased her from our local, very well-known breeder, Mr. Fred Wrigley. You may have heard of the Kinley Labradors. Richard showed you some of the Kinley dogs in his earlier, and I purchased a Kinley bitch, and she was called Kinley Magic, and she was magic, she was lovely. And like everyone else, eventually, I mated her to the Crufts winning dog, which was Follytown Merrybrook Black Storm. And so I had these wonderful puppies. Yes, there he is. And I was entranced by this dog and by Mrs. Woolley, who knew all about Labradors, and I didn't know really anything. And she came to see my litter. And I think we must have made a jolly good job of this litter because they were big, strong, hefty bitches and dogs. And she said, and she praised me and said, "You've done quite a nice job here, dear." And then she said she might like to buy one. Well, I was overwhelmed. She did, but in those days, a lot of our breeders would buy a good puppy, it still happens today, and then sell it on abroad because she had a nice customer for it, which she did. And so one of the first Rocheby's went abroad. I repeated that mating, and Gunilla Anderson came and she bought one of mine. So you had one of my very first Rocheby's over here in Sweden, in the Roscoe's kennel. And we went, Spring Song was my first decent Labrador. I often say to people, you know, when you're breeding, you really can't make bricks without straw, because in the old days we used to have straw to make bricks. Well, I say you can't, you really have to have a good bitch. Well, I didn't have a good bitch, because my Kinley bitch, really, I thought it was wonderful. It gained a 4th prize in an open show, and that to me was, you know, I'm a show winner. But really, I think she only gained 4th prize because there were only 4 in the class. But anyway, this 4th prize winning dog was the epitome of what I wanted. And having mated her to Stormer, he improved what I got. I've got a nice solid bitch in many ways, with absolutely no stifle. She had an okay head. You would have liked it. I set about altering that. And quite honestly, they were lovely dogs. They weren't the soundest, I have to say. We had a period then of having to progress to soundness. But we had improved on our original bitch. In Spring Song, she herself was reasonably sound, but the rest of the litter were not. I think Gunilla's was fairly sound, and Spring Song was sound, but the rest of the litter were not particularly sound. So we really hadn't got a sound basis, but then I didn't know that then. I didn't know that these dogs could or could not be sound. A dog's a dog, for goodness sake. So then we progressed from Spring Song. And Spring Song got a reserve CC, but guess who gave her the reserve CC? Mr. Raglan. So, I'm not so sure whether she deserved it or whether she didn't, but she did have it. So there we are, I have a reserve CC winning bitch. But the next bit of huge influence in my breeding was I was persuaded to go and buy a bitch. And that was a good turning point. I went and bought a bitch which I called Sweet Talk of Rocheby. She was Sandylands bred. Jerry Kenningley had a very good dog count on. He had some very good Sandylands bred dogs. In many ways, they were slightly different to the basic Sandylands dog at Sandylands, but they were high quality dogs. And they were also very sound. And so that was a big turning point for me. I now had high quality bitch, Sweet Talk, who had a reserve CC, can you believe this, at 6 months and 2 days, and given to me by one of the very best judges, and I thought of our era was Mrs. Stocking, or she was then. So I'm learning by this time. I'm busy, I'm really trying to learn. And one of the most influential people who taught me fronts was Margot Woolley. Margot taught me a long front. Now, we have horses and ponies at home, but when you have horses and ponies, you have to have a long front in order to ride it. Because if you have a rotten shoulder on a horse, believe you me, you don't want to ride it. You really don't want to. You really want to put a cart behind it, because you certainly can't ride it. So the withers, or the actual point of shoulder, is all important to the front movement, and you learn that very quickly if you have horses or ponies. So the same applied, and I didn't realise this until I was getting on into the dogs and learning more, and certainly from Margot, that the point of shoulder was all important to the actual front assembly and the movement of the dog in front. So here am I'm being given extremely good advice. The one thing that Margot did not bother about at all, and she would tell you herself, was the rear end. She didn't care. Oh, she said, it's all right, dear, it follows. And Stormer, that's a very, very generous photograph of Stormer's rear end, I can honestly tell you that. Stormer had an absolutely super front and absolutely hardly any back end. It really did. Now my Sweet Talk of Rocheby and my Kinley bitch that I had bred to Stormer both had good rears. Fortunately, we had good width of thigh. So that was something that I really quite treasured. I thought that they were that balanced. And I felt that was the crux of the matter here. That dog to me, although I loved him and he went at Crufts and that was the epitome of everything, and I used him because of all that, not because I knew anything about dogs, I learned then that really it was the balance I was looking for. And if you didn't have a balance, you didn't have a back end. And if you didn't have a front end, but you had a back end, you still haven't got the balance. So balance to me was where I learned, or thought I was learning, to produce the type of dog I would like to have. And it was through the Sandylands were definitely heavier built. They had better bone. They had good substance all through. And it was to those dogs that we were looking really to produce the type of dogs we wanted to go for. Some of the puppies I was breeding, they came out well, but don't forget I'd got 2 totally different bloodlines going. And so some were like one dog and some were like the bitch line. So that was all a bit of a, what shall I say, a lottery. So it was a bit of a lottery as to what we were going to keep. Fortunately, I managed to keep 1 or 2 that were quite good. And we tried to progress from that. Luckily for me, there was in my day, where I lived was a heavy mining industry. And a lot of miners had dogs, pigeons, whippets. You can imagine, that was their hobby when they came out of the mines. Fortunately, one of the mining community was a good Labrador chap called Hubert Bennett, Bensondale. And he had the most wonderful dog, and it was called Sandilands Playboy, and he was by Sandilands, it was called Bensondale Playboy by Sandilands My Lad. One of the very few My Lad sons that stayed in England, because My Lad was exported to Australia. There was very little of My Lad around, in actual fact. So My Lad resided in the next village to where I lived, and so I used My Lad. What super puppies we had. Super. They were full of bone and substance and quality, and their temperaments were excellent. The only thing that was really, when I look back, lacking a bit was coat. They had a short coat. Very short. Wasn't that thick, dense coat that we look for now, or that other strains of Labrador would produce. I didn't know that we were lacking coat then. I just thought that these dogs were the absolute tops. And they competed quite well. They were sound and they were good. Now here I'm getting a bit excited because now I've got a couple of good brood bitches. I've kept puppies. And my husband, when my children were little, he was a golfer. My poor kids had to be put in a pushchair like you were and taken to shows. My mother was very good. She occasionally would come and sit with these poor children, and she'd be bored silly, and they were bored silly, and everybody was bored silly, but mother was prancing around in the ring with these Labradors. And as long as mother was happy prancing around the ring in these Labradors, everybody else would have to be happy. So this went on for quite some years, this prancing around in the open shows, and I ventured to the championship shows. That was a huge eye-opener. I was looked after marvellously by the elderly Labrador fraternity. They were so good to me. In those days my name was Marion Lee. My first husband was David Lee. And I had a lady called Betty Lamming. Remember, yes, remember Mrs. Lamming? She was on one side of me in the benches, because everything was benched then, and I had Bessie Lidster on the other, Lidcoat, on the other side. I had these 2 wonderful mothers in Labradors looking after me. They were wonderful. They liked what I'd got, or some of what I'd got. Betty liked some, and Bessie liked the others. But I was very well catered for with advice. Sometimes it was quite smothering, the advice, particularly from Mrs. Lamming, who would tell me this was all right, but that was definitely not, and I should give it away. And I had lots of that sort of advice. But however, being a bit of a rebel, I stuck to what I thought I liked myself. I can only tell you that in those days, I was very fortunate, as a lot of you were of my era. We had big kennels to go to for stud dogs. We had huge kennels. Mrs. Nokina Williams, she gave me a wonderful reserve CC with Rocheby Spring Song, who was the bitch that came from the Kinley bitch. We had the Ballyduff kennel. We had the Cookridge kennel. We had so many wonderful kennels. Then the younger kennels were all starting. Again, the Kenninglys, they had a very good Longley kennel. The Mardas kennel started around my time. She was just in front of me, was Marlene. And I used to take Marlene with Martin to the shows.
And you've also chosen to show a picture of champion
Martin of
Mardas.
I used Martin, and he went very well on the My Lad daughter, marvellously, as you can imagine, because the breeding was there. Now, I had a car at my disposal, because I have to tell you it was a bit old and battered, but I had a car and Marlene did not. So I used to have to go to Castleford and pick Marlene up with Martin, and I would have my dog, my bitches. I didn't have males in those days, I only had bitches, I wouldn't keep males. And we went to the big championship shows together in my battered car. Around my battered car, in every window, Marlene put big placards, Mardas puppies for sale. My car was just a mobile advert for Mardas. We went everywhere. We went down, ventured down to London, to LKA when it was at Earl's Court. We did everything in this battered old car. You would never venture out in such a car these days. However, we did, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. We also went, I'm sure you did too, we went on buses. They ran bus trips to dog shows. Mrs. Satterthwaite was very good of Lawnwoods to get buses together. So we would drive down to Leicester, and you would have to purchase your ticket for a double seat, and the dog would sit next to you, but you had to purchase a double seat, you would have to buy for the dog. And you would all pile into this bus, and off you went, and sometimes it was down to Newton Abbot, which was where the West of England Championship show was, right down in the bottom of Devon, or we went up to Ayr in Scotland to go and show at the Labrador Club of Scotland. All these times, I had never seen the mountains of Scotland until I went on the bus to Scotland with a dog. So it was a very exciting time, And I had some wonderful breedings going on, but I didn't know how wonderful they were, really. Sweet Talk produced beautifully. Then I discovered, really... Sorry, did you want to?
No, not at all.
Am I rambling? We discovered Fullstead Pearl Barley. My husband, by this time my first husband had died, and I now had the support of David Hopkinson. I actually met David because I sold him a dog, which he will tell you was the most expensive thing he's ever bought. He came to buy a puppy from me to work, and I called this puppy, I think we called it Mary Mary or something silly because we had the children. And he said, I can't take a dog into the shooting field calling it Mary Mary. So he called her Jill. And I think I continued to sell him dog food for quite some while before we actually decided that we were good pals and eventually got married. So David had long discovered the Fullstead kennel and thought that this is where we should go. And Fullstead Barley was the young dog at Fullstead at that time. We had purchased a Fullstead bred bitch from Sue Hill, Elverledge. And this was called Elverledge Tudor Treasure. Now we were still coming along the raw days of hips. And Elverledge Tudor Treasure was the first dog we had with 0 hips. Well, they weren't 0, it was a pass. It was a pass. A pass! We had a bitch with a pass. Wonderful. In actual fact, she was quite a stilted moving bitch. You can't say that she was the best moving bitch. She probably was not. She was a very nice bitch, but she was bred heavily to preferential and problem. She was actually a problem daughter out of a preferential granddaughter. So that shows you how close she was. She bred, well, she was difficult to breed because she had very poor seasons. But we bred her to Ballywell. We thought we should, because she was closely bred, we should go out, which we did, to Ballywell. And that produced lovely dogs, very nice dogs, but nothing in the top bracket of winning. They were good, they were sound, and they were very nice type.
Could you elaborate a little bit around Pearl Barley? What attracted you to this particular dog in the Poolstead line? Was it David that attracted you to the Poolstead, or was that a joint business?
No, it was David. He loved this dog. But David, let me explain to you that David had been a pig breeder, and he would have nothing on the premises that didn't have a good ham. So my long fronts, I won't compromise on the long fronts. He's not going to compromise on the ham. Pearl Barley definitely, it doesn't really look so much there, but he definitely had a wonderful back end and a very low hock. Now all that is very complimentary. If you get a low hock and a wide thigh, it's a wonderful complementary thing to a long front and a good set elbow. Everything just gels in and you get the biscuit to marry up. But Pearl Barley himself was really no more than a good bitch. He wasn't actually a stallion dog to look at all. But our bitches were quite strongly bred. They were strong bitches. We didn't have weak bitches. And so this dog did very well for us on our type of bitch.
Could you elaborate a little around hocks, longish hock versus a short hock? You've chosen these two pictures to illustrate this point.
I think it nearly tells its own story.
Well, why is it so very important for a dog to have a short, strong hock as opposed to a longer hock?
For one thing, the standard asks you for a let-down hock, which I believe is a short hock. I also believe that the power comes from the hock in the drive. If you have a long hock, you lessen the amount of muscles that you've got in the thigh. You lose the second thigh very often, and therefore you get a higher action. You get a pumping action. With a short hock, I think you have the thrust forward. But you've also, if you don't have a good shoulder, you don't get the forearm to complement it. So you have the thrust from the back and the reach from the front. And they ask you for reach and drive, or people talk about reach and drive, but I sometimes wonder where they think the reach and drive comes from. Because the short hock is the piston. It's really actually taking the dog forward. That's the motor. And the reach coming out there is the other piston at the end, and you've got the two going absolutely in tandem. So that gives you that beautiful movement. And I don't think there's anything better than to see a very good moving dog. If I can just relate to Richard's wonderful portrayal of our breed, I was told by Fred Wrigley when I first started to show, you must always remember, dear, you are responsible for breeding the perfect machine for the man in the field to use, whether or not he chooses to use it in the field. It is your job to produce that. And that was his actual thing that he believed. He believed his kennel dogs, and they were good workers. I'm certain they were. But they also, the Poolstead line was evolved from the Kinlevich, or the Kinleviches. And the Poolsteads were good workers, no doubt about it. So, again, it's our duty. I know we've split now completely with the working side, but we haven't split with the dogs who can work. A lot of the showing dogs that are built correctly and trained will work as shooting dogs, picking up dogs. Dogs that will go out in the field and retrieve game, which is what it's about. They're not good for field trials that are done on speed and accuracy, etc. They're a different species, and that's fine. It's horses for courses. I have no bother with anybody having what they like. But in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, some of the dogs should not be called Labradors. They should be called very fine retrievers. And that is what they are. Fast, fine retrievers. Very little to do with a Labrador. But that's all another story. But I do believe that we do have the responsibility to think about the working aspect of the breed, and that is down, in my opinion, to the construction. Because if they're not correctly constructed, then it's harder for them to do the job. It's not that they can't do it, it's just more difficult.
Could you, by this time, it's probably true to say that the Rocheby line was established. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the dogs that have been of major influence in your breeding program? Some of which are portrayed
well, yes,
here.
Absolutely, but the pretentious, of course. Well, David was in love with the Poolstead line. There's no doubt about that. He loved the Poolsteads. And I quite liked them, I think is what I would say. I wasn't as in love with these Poolsteads as he was. We had developed one or two good dogs that were winning. We were at a show once, and Dee Dee was at the same show, and we had a young dog called Ambassador. And he was a nice dog. And Dee Dee didn't like him. And she said to David, "You want to sell that dog? It's not good enough. You can come and look at one of mine." Well, we went to look at the dog that Dee Dee wanted David to look at. And it was pretentious. Now, I'm not going to make any bones about this. I thought the dog was awful. David said, "It's a good dog." You know, my husband is a Yorkshireman, and he has a dialect that some of you wouldn't actually understand. They can't understand in England sometimes, but anyway. "It's a good dog, that, and don't you say a word." All right, okay. So, however, after some discussion about price, and I was absolutely horrified, we parted with a cheque, or I did. I parted with a cheque in silence, and we took home this dog that I was not at all enamoured with. We didn't speak for quite some days. We had already produced Acorn. She was our first really big winning bitch. Acorn was already at home. Lovely bitch. And she had been, we tried to breed her down at Sandilands to Royal Escort, anyway she missed. And Royal Escort wasn't the very best of stud dogs. David, remember this, David is a pig breeder. And he came home and he said, "Well, we're not going back there because that dog doesn't know what it's doing." Oh, right, so anyway. So we come home with this dog I'm not too pleased about. And we've got our prize bitch in season. What are we going to do with Peggy? This is Acorn. I'm going to put young dog on her. Oh my God. Never are. Well, he says, you're too late anyway, because I've already done it. This is how much influence I've got. Don't think he's henpecked, because believe you me, he's not henpecked. So anyway, the ensuing litter came, and what a litter it was. Acorn had she had 11 puppies every time. She was just, and this, these bitches are just God's gift, aren't they? Just by herself, 11 bitches, sorted them all out. That's what happens. Isn't breeding easy?
And here,
and this is the litter that we have from Acorn and Pretentious in the first instance is Popcorn and Royal Oak. And Cornflower came here to mow her son.
here we are.
These were little brother and sister, Popcorn and Royal Oak. They were honestly quite almost unique at the time of their type. They were almost a new type. Their top lines were beautiful, their hands were good, their fronts were good, their temperaments were great. They really were super. And we couldn't believe our luck. We're still learning such a lot. Mrs. Hepworth was absolutely fed up with us because we came out with these beautiful puppies by this dog that she had sold us. So I don't see how you can complain, they're half Poolstead. She actually liked them very much. She was
Could
very
you please tell us a little bit about Mrs. Hepworth, whose name crops up here and there? She made a lasting impression in the world of Labradors.
She's lovely.
Please tell us.
She had the most wonderful kennel. She, I think, was most influential in how we choose our stud dogs and how we breed. She told David, she liked David, they would get into lots of conversations together, they were good pals. And she would explain to him how her pedigrees worked. You need to breed, the best breeding is your cousins. As long as the grandparents that make the cousins are good. Use your cousins. And that's what we did from then on. But contrary to all that, these were complete outcrosses. Acorn was in no way related to Pretentious at all until you went a long way back, 6 maybe generations. So this confounded everybody because here they were, this was the lottery syndrome. But we didn't have to go to America or anywhere else to bring the dog. It was here in England because we had the kennels. So we were reaping all of the Poolstead quality with the substance of the Sandylands bitches. This is how we viewed it. And I can honestly say that I think, I don't know whether we shall ever see these wonderful kennels again, because I don't know how many young breeders want to evolve kennels. A kennel is hard work. A kennel means a lot of dogs. It isn't just a few, it's a numbers game. It's keeping 4 and 5 out of every litter, assuming they're promising, and keeping them till they're 6 or 7 months old. It's expensive. It's heartbreaking. They have things go wrong. You put them down, you sell them, or you give them away, or things like that, and you've reared them to 8 or 9 months, and it all goes pear-shaped. And and you have to be strong enough to stay in there and do it all again. But when it goes right, and you do it all again, we did that mating 3 times, 3 different times. It produced 3 very different litters, but all were beautiful. The second litter, we didn't keep, well, we kept Rolling Stone, but we then let Mary O'Donoghue have him. Rolling Home went to America. Rolling Stone we kept, but they eventually went to Ireland. 3 of them went off to various countries and did extremely well. That was the second litter. The third litter, the third time we did it, was Whiskey Mac and Polka Dot and Prim and Proper. So it just worked. Why? We don't know, but nobody knows. It's all to play for. So now we have set ourselves a wonderful foundation of dogs that are outcrosses. So now we think we can really line breed on these dogs because they are an outcross. And we have been doing that ever since. We've really been trying to keep this line or type. And you, as Richard says, you can get a type through just going in one direction, but the people who would be going in the direction of the work ethic and the ethos of these dogs, probably it was down to their build as to how they were being clever at working, which is why they were selected. It wouldn't be just the picking up of the game. I think the aesthetic look of the dog would probably be as much of an influence as to how those dogs would be used in the field and then bred from, as ours are now, that we look at the ethos of what we're trying to achieve, both in the ring and keep the breed standard correct as we see it. And we all see it that little bit differently.
Marion, Polka Dot is a bitch that is very often mentioned as one of the great bitches of all times. Please tell her a little bit about her record and why she was so special in many ways. What made her a truly outstanding Labrador?
I think her size, she was an ideal size. She was neither too big nor too small. She was perfectly balanced. Because of her ideal size, she was a very, very easy, even mover. Never faltered. The track up was absolutely straight and true. And she was just, she had the coat. She had quite a feminine head for me. If I was to have asked for anything on Polka Dot, I would have liked a little more head. Whiskey Mac had the head. He had plenty of head. Popcorn had more head. She had a beautiful head. Polka Dot's head for me was just a little bit not as strong as Popcorn's.
How many times did she win Best of Breed at Crafts, Polka Dot?
3.
3 years. 3 years running, Best of Breed at Crafts.
And can I just tell you, the last time she did it, she stopped off and had 11 puppies in between and went back and got Best of Breeds the 3rd time.
Is that a record that's ever been out?
No, I hope it's never beaten, but I'm sure it might well be. But,
and we're talking of how many dogs? 400 or 500 dogs
yes,
competing.
it was a very nice entry.
400 or 500 dogs
It was
to win Best of Breed 3 years running.
It was a wonderful thing. It was truly wonderful.
What an achievement.
Oh, well, that's down to the dog. I have to tell you, that's down to the dog. But it's the fire you feel. You know, when you're breeding, I'm sure you will feel this, or if you don't, then give up and go and do something else, because you really have to feel the passion in your heart. You have to feel it. You know, you put And choosing your dogs, choosing your puppies. I hear everyone saying, no, they sell them at 8 weeks. And I don't. I'm very hard to buy from. I'm very difficult to buy from. Because I don't like letting a good one go. No. Put that away. When you line breed as well, as closely as we have been doing recently, the last few years, you do get a type. You really do get sort of consolidate your type, and so you know when they're failing, you know when they're not enough, the head's not enough or the bone's not enough.
But tell us also a little bit about her importance as a brood bitch.
Fabulous, wasn't she? I mean, she did everything. When she stopped off to have this 11 puppies, we kept 4. We kept 3 bitches and a dog. And we kept pure linen, powder blue, peppermint, and Old Smoky. Old Smoky I thought would have raced to the top, but he was so lethargic. He really didn't care. All right, you want to go to the show? All right. I'll tag along if you wish. The bitches all were good showgirls. Peppermint, I felt, was very hard done by, but then her 2 sisters were made up, and I think people were pretty fed up with us by then, actually. Here we were with another one. They get fed up with somebody, stealing the thunder, don't they? So, but Old Smoky, he had been good enough, I think, to have been made up, but he really was lazy. And I can honestly tell you, when Carol Krug was judging Crufts, Smoky was still a young dog. Oh, he was in postgraduate, so he wouldn't be that old. And there's a wonderful picture that some Japanese people sent to me. It was a big class, because we had big classes in those days anyway. And the picture portrays David into space. This is in the ring, and the dog fast asleep on the green carpet.
But regardless of his sleepiness in the ring, it proved to be one of the...
He actually got up and won the class.
That's called male power, I think. But his influence on the breed is undeniable. Why do you think he actually became the sire of the century? Or the last of the century?
I really do believe that we have the power of the 2 great kennels behind him. We have the power of the Sandylands and the power of the Postings. We have the power there of the 2 great kennels, and we were the lucky ones. Well, David was one with the foresight to put them together. He wanted his hams, and I wanted my fronts. And that is how we evolved. The Rocheby kennel, really, it became a compromise of pigs and horses.
But do you think he had any physical attributes that sort of helped him to become this very important sire?
I think one of the most important things that you all must never forget, and I must never forget, that his temperament was impeccable, and what he produced in temperament was by and large impeccable. His children were lovely, lovely, not only lovely Labradors to look at, but lovely Labradors to own. And many of them went on to do field work. They're obedient, they're trainable, they weren't lazy like him. We have had many of his sons and daughters at home, and they're just wonderful. He lived himself to be nearly 16, he was 15 years old, and we had to have him put to sleep. It's a wonderful longevity line, I can tell you. Some of them have nearly outstayed their welcome. Doc Gelvin had her Rocheby rippling corn, which is on the front of my book. That was Rocheby rippling corn. That's Popcorn's sister. She was an American champion. and she lived till she was 17. 17, that's the oldest Labrador I know of personally, but I'm sure there might be others. But that was a very long living line. They were very sound, and a lovely longevity line, but they produced and produced.
Is it not so that he, for a couple of years, was the top sire of all breeds in the UK?
Yes, that was a shock. I have to tell you. Neither David or I ever. We don't take statistics. We don't really count what we win or what's going on. Someone told us that he was going to be the top sire in the gun dog group. I think it was Anthony Allen. He said, "Your Smokey's going to be top sire in the gun dog group." I said, "Oh, is it?" Good. And then Simon Parsons rang. We were actually on holiday in Tenerife, and he rang. And he said, "Your dog, Rocheby Old Smoky, is the top stud dog." And I said, "Oh, all right. Oh, thank you." He said, "But we want an article on him." I said, "Oh." Well, I said, "He's not a champion or anything, you know." And writing an article on Smokey was a bit difficult. I mean, what do you do with a dog that's not got CCs and he's not been a champion? And I dare not tell you what Linda Porter said, what his career had been, but it was very rude. She was extremely rude about him. She said, "Oh, your old Smokey spent his life bitches." I said, "Well, I can't write that, can I?"
Let's move on a little bit to matings, Marion. Rocheby's been very consistent with type, Rocheby type. Tell us a little bit how you plan matings. When you want to mate a bitch, what considerations are paramount here?
Well, David and I discuss things, and we still differ. So we do have...
Does he always win?
Yes. Short answer to that is yes. I have these whims and fancies, as he calls them. Your whims and fancies. We're not going with that whims and fancy. I have these ideas. I'm particularly with the stock now that's quite tightly bred. I say, "Oh, do you know, I quite fancy that dog. I like that young dog." And I can honestly tell you, we have, in our minds, decided to use various dogs around the country. I have to tell you, we've never thought of using various dogs around the world. We really haven't. We've thought about using various dogs around the country. For some reason or other, it either hasn't worked out, that we were either away, or the bitch was not in season at the right time, or it missed. The bitches never materialised on some of these very good ideas. And he even went along with these very good ideas. So I can't say that he sabotaged them. But invariably, we ended up at home. Now, when you've evolved a kennel quite as big as ours, we now have 11 male dogs, which is a lot of dogs, males, a lot of male dogs. So the temptation to stay home is quite great, really. You don't have to go out, you don't have to spend a stud fee, you don't have to go travelling. The dog's there, if the bitch isn't ready, use it tomorrow, and all this business, you know, it's all handy. It's very handy, having a big kennel of dogs. I have to say that the most successful breedings we've done usually come from the dogs we have at home. It still is the case, but then we did import a dog. This was Achtias then. I discovered Achtias when I was judging in France. I did not know who he belonged to. The chap who he did belong to wasn't showing any of his dogs, as far as I knew. This dog came into the ring with a man I knew to be a Mexican, because I'd been to Mexico judging. And I liked this yellow dog very much. And I can remember thinking, what the heck's this Mexican doing with this decent yellow? And I'm looking all over for a good yellow, and here it is, and this Mexican's got it. I was quite taken aback, I really was. Anyway, the Mexican gentleman was staying with the owner of the dog, and apparently the owner of the dog asked him to show it, which he did. I did not give that dog best of breed, but I liked the dog enormously because he reminded me of Smokey.
That's why you've also chosen to portray them together.
He reminded me very much of the Smokey type. He was lovely. I really liked him. I came home with a photograph of the dog and said to David, what do you think about this dog? Why don't we try this dog? It looks like our type. So we had Aspen with us for 15 months, and we produced Silver Suede out of a Whiskey Mac daughter. Now that gave us a whole new line, because the Whiskey Mac daughter, I don't know whether she's on there here, Bridgeford Crystal Clear, was out of a totally new bloodline for us, something that we didn't have, hadn't had, didn't even know about, actually. It's a chap who brought this bitch, Bramble Ridge Rave Review, to Whiskey Mac, and I looked at this black bitch and I said, wow, I like this. No, you don't pay a stud fee, can I come and have a couple, please? And this is how we had Bridgeford Crystal Clear. Now, subsequent to that story is, Bramble Ridge Rave Review was a naughty girl at home. I didn't know that. She was an escape artist. And 2 years after we had this puppy, no, very soon I think after we had these puppies, the owner of this bitch came to us and said, would you like, oh, we're going to get rid of, I forgot what she was called. Anyway, whatever she was called. They called her Wizzy. Wizzy. We're going to get rid of Wizzy. We're going to find a home for her. Oh, I said, don't you find a home for Wizzy. I'll buy her. I'll have her. I'll have Wizzy. So we had Wizzy. And we mated Wizzy to Old Smokey. So, yes. And we got State Occasion, Statesman, and Snow Orchid. Again, we kept 3. We were in Australia when they were born, and our very good friend in the guide dogs whelped her, and she produced a chocolate. So that is where the chocolate gene comes from in Old Smokey, which has hampered me for all these years, and is still hampering me for all these years, because it's still trickling down, and Old Punch now produces a chocolate, which I find not for me.
But going back to matings, Marion, you're talking about outcross matings here.
I am.
Would it be true to say that you're still looking for a consistency of type?
Always. See, we're mindful that we've got to outcross, because we have seen how people... The one thing Margot taught me as well was that if you go too close, and Dee you'll lose size. And Popcorn was small enough. She wasn't short in leg, but she was neat, if you were to say she was a compact bitch. Her full sisters and brothers were in actual fact good sizes, so that was all right. But we were very mindful of the fact that if we went in and in and in, we were probably going to lose size. And so we were trying to find the same dogs, the same type, produce the same dogs, produce the same type, but keep that little bit of new blood trickling through. Now I think we've done it now. I personally believe what we've got trickling through is enough. I think we can play about with what we've got now for a long time. I don't think it's too close. The Kennel Club would totally disagree with me. If you put these into the into our breed for the coefficient, I think you'll find that the Kennel Club would totally disagree with me. But then we're getting to an era where people do not breed type. They're not. Richard explained to you how the type evolved through itself from the working side, and then it's been lost purely and simply because people are not breeding a type. And I think once you have found in your heart the dog that really warms your heart, the one you want to look at, we like that lovely head. I was just speaking to Gunilla Ek, and I had taken a very young dog under her a long time ago, and she gave him a reserve ticket, and her explanation to me was, "This is the most beautiful head." And I said, "Oh, thank you, I'm glad you think so too." But when you find that lovely balance and the lovely head that you want to produce, then you are going to look for that. So you have to try and put the combinations together you think may well give it to you. It may not, but you have to keep trying. Because if you don't, you haven't got anything yourself. Which is why I say, have you got a kennel? Or have you just got a collection? It comes down to your heart, really. You breed with your eyes and your heart. The pedigree is incidental, I think, in many respects, although it is influential in some of the most influential dogs. But for us, it's been the bitches that we feel have been the catalyst for the real quality. Or they've been dogs that come out of wonderful bitches. We don't just use a dog. We won't use a dog if it didn't come out of a super bitch. The dog might not be too great, but if the bitch it's come out of, the sire of it was good, you've got a batting chance there.
Tell us about breed type, Marion. What constitutes breed type in Labradors? Richard had a go at this a few hours ago. Can we have a second version here, please? What constitutes breed type? It's one of those elusive words that we talk about a lot. But how does one define breed type in Labradors?
Richard's very fond of a lesser head than I am, although I think what he likes is the same expression. I think a dog's eye shape, or the Labrador eye shape, is absolutely crucial to the expression. I think, I do believe that starts your look of breed type. The expression it gives you is the basis of the type you're looking at. I don't like too deep a stop. I really don't like that at all. I think it has to be gentle and kind. I think most of my dogs have got a gentle stop, whereas it might be a little bit more than some of the blacks we were looking at that have got a lesser stop, but still attractive, but still giving you that basic compliance with everything you want to do, the willingness, the asking, shall I do this? Is this right? What do you want me to do? Will I? Are you taking me? It's all there, and it's all there to be seen in the eye, and the expression in the head. The next thing I think is you've got to have a good set on of head to shoulder, a head to neck, should I say. There's an awful lot of dogs that they do have a good lay of shoulder, but the head is sort of stuffed up. It's not. There's almost a quality. I think it's called a quality rise behind the poll, and the head is looking forward instead of this sort of. I don't know. It's not. Yes, it's a different. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining that very correctly.
You've chosen two pictures here. If you perhaps talk a little around these, would that be of any help?
Yes. Now you see, that's a very lovely bitch. She was a beautiful bitch. It's not really doing her a huge justice in the neck area. This dog here There's brother and sister, I think. He had the set on of head, the head is actually looking at you instead of doing that. And it's all to do with this lovely rise after the poll, the skull shape, and then there's a slight rise onto the neck. The neck is, in horses it's very obvious, but it's a set on of head to neck rather than continuum of the neck up into the skull shape. And I think that makes a huge difference to the actual setup of the dog. The dog can set itself up. And if a dog can set itself up, then you've got some quality there. And quality again is like type, is how do you...
That is my next question. Quality. What is quality in Labrador?
Quality is balance. First of all, it's got to be balanced. I think quality is definitely balance. I think the next thing in quality is very often a coat, a real Labrador coat, a proper jacket that fits, a jacket that's short and straight but deep, a jacket that wraps around the root of the tail. It's a wrapped tail. It wraps underneath and it comes out flat on the underside. I think that's the quality is all those, and the fact that when the back end moves, those hocks go down like pistons. That's quality. It's a quality dog. It's got the construction, it's got all the attributes that you're looking for. And I think the smoothness of coat, I think the coat is very crucial to a dog looking raggy. The same conformation on two dogs can look entirely different if the coats are different.
Yeah.
And I really do believe if you get that beautiful, well-laid, thick jacket that doesn't roll around and it goes with the dog, and you can stick your fingers into it, and you run your hand straight down from neck through to the top line, and the tail set straight off. That's another thing, you see, tail sets are crucial to me. I have to have a good tail set. I can't bear bad tail sets. I can't bear low tail sets, and I really don't like high tail sets, although they can be acceptable in some instances, but I'm not fond of them. I like tails straight off. I think it makes all the difference. That, I think, is producing quality.
Okay, I'm saying this with tongue-in-cheek, but do you think correct Labrador coats are becoming unfashionable?
I think they're becoming difficult to find. I think, and when you've got them, you see, we've got dogs now. You use dogs, don't we? We all do. We all use dogs for different reasons. We might use a dog because it's got more head, less bone, more bone, good feet, it's got this, it's got that, it's got the other. And it might have a frilly coat, what I call a frilly coat. I hate frilly coats. Coats with bits all over the place. Raggy coats. And the other thing is people don't ever prepare their dogs, in my opinion, enough for the show. Why on earth would you go with a dog and you hold the tail up and it just looks like a golden retriever? Why would you do that? At least do something about it. You have got a pair of thinning scissors or something. At least, for God's sake, do something about it. You don't have to show the world it's got a golden retriever. So they shouldn't be trimmed. I don't believe in that. You want a good wrapped tail, and you can tell with the coat whether it's a good coat. But if you haven't got that, at least make the best of what you've got. Don't take it and show everybody that what you did wasn't totally successful.
Another thing I would like you to give us your thoughts on is that the Labrador, which is as a numerically strong breed worldwide, is considered to be such a very tricky breed for many judges.
Yes.
Why is it that judging of Labradors is so very inconsistent?
I feel sad about this, and I feel very strongly about it. I have bred and judged 4 breeds. I only give tickets in 2. I chose not to give tickets in the other 2 because I didn't feel I was qualified. I think a lot of people judge Labradors because they think they're easy. They're everybody's dog, and my title of my book is Everyone's Dog. They see them on every street corner. It's just a Labrador. I think it's the just a Labrador syndrome. I really do. And I think that sums up an awful lot of the attitude of a lot of people to judging a Labrador. Oh, it's just a Labrador. And yes, what you see is what you get. But how are you looking at it? It's what you look at that goes through into your eyes and decides to whether you think it's a decent Labrador or not. Or have you had enough of them? We now have many judges, unfortunately, that haven't had many dogs. 3 or 4, maximum. How does that equate to experience? It doesn't. And does it equate to any, what shall I say, expertise? No, it doesn't. And I think it's very arrogant. I have said this, unfortunately I'm rather outspoken. I have said this to some people who think that they told me they ought to be judging and giving tickets now. I said, why? Perhaps if you were to produce a good dog, it might help. You have to beware now that and I'm sure I don't know whether it's the same here, but in England now, to be a judge, you just have to tick the boxes. So, what is the good of a box if all you can do is tick it and you don't really know what the box meant? You've read it in a book. Well, you can't have experience out of a book. You have to have it. You can't all be like us. I mean, we've been so lucky. You have and still have all these wonderful dogs. But we have the facilities and we're both dedicated to it. But you have to have the passion for a breed. It isn't just another thing that you put on your CV so that you can go trotting around the world because it's the biggest breed in the world and you can always get a Labrador appointment. Doesn't matter who you are. If you can give tickets in Labradors, you can go, it's a ticket around the world. And that, unfortunately, is what is driving an awful lot of our youngsters. And I feel very sad about that.
I think this is a phenomenon we're very well aware of, also in this country. Let's move on to puppies, and let's move on to things connected with the actual breeding. Tell us a little bit how you see health issues in the breed. We talk so much about various health issues. Do you think the breed has to a greater degree than previously have health problems, or is it that we are more skilled at detecting things which are not always not perhaps even a clinical problem? How do you feel about this modern era of testing? Is the breed sounder, or is it not? Do enlighten us.
You know, don't you? This is why you're asking. Look, I honestly believe now that the Labrador is in good shape. We haven't got any real answer to the hips. We haven't got any answer to the actual skeleton, but we've improved, in my opinion, we've improved the value of the dog's clinical movement. We have more clinically sound dogs than ever before. We have more dogs than ever before, but we have a lot of good sound dogs. And the X-ray has been very helpful to a lot of kennels. And we X-ray like everyone else does. But it doesn't tell you the story, and we don't know how even the best 0-0 dogs, we put 2 0-0 dogs together and we had the worst trips ever. We had to apologise to a lot of people for very crippled dogs that had to be put to sleep. And that was, don't know why, but it happened. A bit like the overshot jaws, that sort of thing. It just is a thing that happens. We've got rid of the most important thing, or we should have got rid of it altogether now. We had the opportunity, and that's GPIO. We should have had that out of this breed completely now for a long time. Unfortunately, I disagree with our kennel club for still registering stock where one parent isn't tested. And I think that that's an absolute disgrace. I think that For GPRA, it's mandatory. We could have rid of the eye problems. The DNA jobs, EIC and all this lot, great long list of them. I have never personally witnessed EIC yet. I hope I don't. Because I and many, who has? Please raise your hand. You have?
Yes.
Okay. You have?
Yes.
Okay. Two. Well, I haven't, I'm very fortunate to say, but here we have a lot of breeders who, probably like me, breed fairly regularly and have bred a lot of dogs. So I cannot think that this is a huge issue in the breed. You may well think so because you've seen it, but I think breed-wise, I don't think it can be a huge issue. So I have taken the stance of, well, okay, I must have been breeding EIC for years. I must have been. Because it seems to me it's coming through every bloodline. There are carriers everywhere. Now, it must be very unfortunate in the animal itself to show clinically the disorder itself. So I can't think that EIC is a huge issue within the breed. There is a test, and if you think it's an issue, you can breed away from it and you can get rid of it. So if you feel you've got an issue, then the tools are there. I think if anything is clinically affecting the dog, like EIC, if you have seen that and you're obviously disturbed by it, I'm sure, then you would do something about it. But I think it's your own personal conscience on what you are doing. You breed your dogs to the most health you can do without being so intrusive. My dogs are clinically sound. I have never seen EIC. I have never had a crusty nose up to now, touch the wood. I have seen one crusty nose. Again, I don't think that is a huge problem in the breed, but that's only how I see it. I think some of the DNA is now just a huge money-making thing because we are a huge breed for the laboratories. I also feel very sad that the laboratories, from making this enormous profits, cannot address some of the very devastating things that are in many of the other breeds that are minorities. Newfoundlands, for a start. They have a lot of problems. Wolfhounds. There are problems in those breeds that need to be addressed for DNA, but the scientists, they'll not produce the science because it's too expensive, and they can't make a profit. And I think nowadays, 90% of most decisions come down to profit. And I feel very sad about that.
Let's go back to hips and elbows a little bit. I mean, also in this country, we've been doing hips and elbows for more than 4 decades. And the percentage of dogs that fail is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And if anything, less encouraging than before. How should we tackle this problem? What are your views on this? Should we do away completely with dogs that do not have perfect hips and elbows? Or do you recommend a more lenient attitude here? How do you feel this in your own breeding program?
You question your own conscience. This is you have to do this yourself. You have to make your own decisions on your own stock. I have 2 dogs. One is a father and son. I have used them both on my own dogs. They both have hip scores into their 20s, which in England is considered absolute no-no. They have both produced very sound stock. They are themselves extremely clinically sound. Good movers, sound dogs, very nice in every other way. I'm not sorry I haven't used them. I'm very pleased I have used them because they've given me the attributes I wanted, which was a lovely, lovely dog with beautiful heads, beautiful temperaments, good movers, and very good hip scores. Now, I'm going to wait on now. I'm getting the next generation through. So we'll see what the third generation will bring. But at the moment, I am not at all sorry that we've used these two dogs and have kept them. They are still there. They are not at general stud. They are for our use. So that is, we are taking the chance. And the people who buy the puppies are told, well, it's on the pedigree anyway, what the hip score of these two dogs are that have sired these puppies. Nobody has turned them down. Yet. Nobody said yes. But that's probably because I'm difficult to buy for on the Jolly Classic sitting gap. But I do believe that you are. I don't think we've moved on with hips, because until there's a DNA, how can we?
As you know, different countries have different rules and see this very differently. I think Germany is probably the hardest country here.
Yeah.
Some might say that is why many German breeders still buy many dogs from other countries.
Yes. Well, I don't know why they buy them in England, because we can't say that we've got a marvellous record. And 00 doesn't produce 00. Well, we all know. You're all breeders, I'm sure. And you know, what can you say about hips? What you've got is what you've got. It doesn't mean to say it's what you're going to get. And it doesn't matter how many outcrosses you do to all these other wonderful hips. You might get wonderful hips and then you've got a lousy Labrador. So what was that point of all that?
Tell us about breeding. What qualities would you never compromise with when breeding Labradors?
First would be temperament. I would never ever compromise on temperament, ever. I think it's the most important thing. It's number one. Without the proper temperament, you haven't got a Labrador anyway. And we all know that 80 or 90% of our dogs go out as pets or whatever. So they have to be better than best. I wouldn't compromise on temperament. I personally will not compromise on a nice long front. No, I'm in that. I have a husband that won't compromise on a good back end, so we don't have that. The other thing I really, really would hate to see is I would hate to see our top lines go. That would distress me. I like a good top line. Whilst the dog is moving, the top line is there, it's still there. And it's there when it's stood. And I like this good, strong back line.
So what qualities are the most difficult to achieve, do you think? Conversely, the easiest? What would be easy to correct and what would be very hard to correct?
I think, again, temperament is hard to correct. If you get a bad temperament in either shyness or aggressive, then really, if you have an aggressive dog, my answer to that is that you go to the vet and you put it to sleep. I'm very sorry that it is the only route. You don't pass it on. If you have a nervous dog, then somebody can live with that perhaps, and it can be somebody's love, as long as it loves the somebody, and the somebody loves it. But don't keep it in your breeding line. Do not ever keep it in your breeding line. I think that...
Are there any particular points that you think are easy to correct?
Yes.
Such as what?
A long hock. Yeah. Why on earth would you have a long hock when you have a short one? I really can't see the point in that. I look and I think, that's a really nice dog, but God, look at its hocks.
What about low tail sets and sloping croups? Do you find those easy to correct, or would you find that? Do you think that when you look at many of the pictures there of dogs, certainly over years gone by, it seems to be rather a prominent feature?
There are two things. I don't like sloping croups. I really don't like them. I think that they are. That's a horseback side. That's a show jumper. And these aren't show jumpers. The other thing I really don't like is a sweeping tail. I really don't like a sweeping tail if I can manage. I'm not sure that you can always correct that, but I do like the tail that comes straight off and it's a straight tail. That's really nice. That completes the picture. That's the picture I'm looking for. But I think...
Sickle tail.
I don't like it. Well, they're not even sickle tails. Sometimes they just have that gentle sweep. And I think, oh, you know, straighten your tail up with you. And I don't like... We have a lot of this. Weak pastimes and dogs that will stand like that. I mean, you have to kick the feet and say, for God's sake, tie your feet up.
Do you think that is down to rearing, which leads us on to perhaps the next set of questions?
I think rearing is very important. I think feet are difficult. If you get bad feet into your breeding, that's nearly like temperament. Hard to get out. Flat feet or slack pasterns are very difficult. Those nice, neat, tight feet with a good round pad underneath, it is a very nice foot to look at, and it works well for the dog. It's much better than this open or not even open, but flat. I see some, they put their feet down like kippers. Down they go, whoa! And they're coming up out here.
Successful breeders are always good at rearing puppies. What's your secret here? How is a Rocheby puppy reared in order to attain its full potential?
Okay. Well, first of all, you've got to put all the food into the bitch. Plenty of meat. We're a meat country. We're all a meat eating. You're a meat eating country. We're a meat eating country. We feed meat. We feed meat. David won't compromise on that. It's another one of his quirks. We feed, and he cooks. He's our cook. He feeds our tribe every day, and he cooks our tribe every day. Our tribe is cooked. The reason for that is once, years and years ago, somebody had a bad batch of tribe, and it actually had something to do with the animal that had come out of, and it killed the dogs. So ever since then we cook tripe, and boy do we know we cook tripe. But now we have a very special kitchen for the tribe, and not all the neighbours are quite as hostile as they used to be. And the fly population in the house is dramatically reduced. So, but we cook, David cooks the meat, but we do feed tripe. We do feed a lot of ordinary meat. We also are lucky enough when we have our own sheep, we kill a few sheep. Years gone by, we were lucky enough to feed sheep's heads, just sheep's heads. We cooked them. We had them in a great big boiler, a huge boiler. We boiled it, the sheep's heads. And the only thing we did was I used to have to go around. We had a big bucket full of these sheep's heads. They were smashed on the ground. I went round with the spade. Bang! It's true, quite barbaric. And the only thing you ever swept up were the teeth. They ate everything else. There was the brain and the tongue and the cheek and everything. Can you imagine all that goodness going in? So if you can... We can't get sheep's head now because of BSE. But we still feed tripe, we still feed lamb. We obviously feed breast of lamb, because that's the bit we don't eat, and neck of lamb. So our dogs have breast of lamb and neck of lamb. And we feed a lot of meat and a whole meal digestive biscuit. Our puppies are reared on a puppy food, because our puppy buyers will not. They won't go around clopping sheep's heads.
Tell us about milk. Milk was traditionally used for puppy rearing. Do you still use milky products at all?
I use rice pudding. I make rice pudding for the puppies. They like that. And David makes egg custards. We have chickens, so we have plenty of eggs. And he makes these big trays of egg custards. And they go into the alga and they come out. We used to have fish, but we can't get it anymore. Lots and lots of fish. If you can get fish, there's nothing better. Cook it very slowly. We used to buy fish heads. I mean, it was so cheap to feed in those days. Now people are silly enough to pay £50 and £60 a bag for some rubbish or something. And we used to feed all this wonderful food for very little, and just it was full of calcium and full of oil and full of everything. And just cook it, let it set, give it to the dogs. They were feeding like kings.
Would you agree if I say that many promising Labrador puppies are not allowed to reach their full potential because they're not reared properly?
Oh, I would agree with that. I see lovely, lovely puppies coming out, or I give away lovely puppies, and then I look at them 6 months later. I'm sure you've all done the same. And you think, oh my God, where did that go? And some are rolling fat on the top and got no bone. How did that happen? And it's not that they were without bone when they went. So it's obviously lots of the wrong food. And I think it's an art to feeding, yes.
Do you think there are any particular problems there? Do they give them too much, or simply the wrong sort of food, or too little?
Well, you probably have guessed that we're not lovers of bag food, what we call complete food. When it says complete for who? Is it really one size fits all? Do we all live on the same amount of food or the same compilation? No, we don't. So one size does not fit all. The dogs might look all right, I'm sure they probably do. But does it really? Is really one size fitting all the dogs? I don't believe it does. I really don't. I think it also contributes to an awful lot of the skin problems that arise and some of the skeletal problems that arise. I think that your metabolic rate is your own. And it's the same with the dogs or the animals. They would go and find that the goat will graze on all the hedges to find out the bits that he needs. The dog would find what he needs if he was allowed to go out and kill and paunch and eat. He would find what he needed. We're not giving him what he needs in a bag, but it's very convenient.
Good breeders also know which puppies to select for future generations. And I know Gwen broadly said that Sunderland puppies had to be evaluated at 8 weeks precisely. Not 7.5, not 8.5, but 8 weeks precisely. Would that apply to Rocheby puppies too?
Yeah, we don't look at them at any time much before that. You can't really look at a puppy before 8 weeks, I don't believe. I see people putting them up at 5 weeks. And nowadays, I mean, they have photographed their puppies and they all say how wonderful they are at 5
Stunning. Stunning is the word now.
Yes, fantastic, yeah, lovely. 8 weeks would be when we look at them. And
would that be the age when you make a first selection? Or would you...
Maybe. Well, it's the age when I discard what I don't want. So I suppose that's a selection, isn't it? It's where we would discard what we wouldn't consider. But the ones that we would consider, I mean, it might only be one. It might only be one. But very often it might be 2 or 3 that we think, hang on, oh, that's a possible. So, there's a right and a left, and I don't know which pile will be bigger.
Do you think it could be so that certain bloodlines should be looked at certain ages in order to see their potential?
I think there are certain bloodlines where you really, really should keep the ones that you think might be potential, because there are lots of bloodlines that don't really show any potential until 5 or 6 or 7 months, until they've been really well fed. They don't show you their potential. I've learned that. We can discard far too easily the one that doesn't look as though it's going to have enough about it on. You look over the top and there's no real rib there, and you look at it again in another month when you've fed it well, and you put your hand around that rib or underneath that brisket, and it's starting to develop. There's an awful lot of puppies don't seem to get their briskets very early. They seem quite flat in the chest. And I learned that, whoa, have a look at that bloodline and look what the mothers and fathers are like. Because it may well be in another month it's all starting to come together.
Puppies go through awkward stages. What would you say was the most awkward stage of all, age-wise, when it came to Labrador puppies?
I think the bit between 12 weeks and 6 months, or 12 weeks and 9 months. You want to let
That's
them...
6 months.
Yeah, but the stupid things, you let them out and they play, and then the one comes in looking like this, and then the other one comes in looking like that, and they go lame on you so easily. They racket about, they go all over the place, they you know, you can't have an exercise regime on a biggish dog like that without letting them have free play at some stage. But if you let them have free play when they're actually crucially at a changing stage in their bone structure, the next thing you've got is a dog that's lame. And you think, my God. Usually it's temporarily. In America they call it pano. Pano osteolysis. They just say it's growing pains. It's the growth plates. That's what they say. Whether or not it is, I have no idea. But 9 times out of 10, and it is as high as that, they come sound. And they x-ray out okay.
But how do you avoid these traps? Health during the growing period. You said they need exercise, but would you advise against having several puppies run together?
Well, yeah, you can't. We've done it, and it doesn't work. They love it, you love to see it, and it doesn't work. We allow them to play, but they now play singly. One at a time. Just one at a time. They have their fluffy things that they run about with, and balls and all that sort of thing. And they're allowed half an hour of free play. Then they're allowed another half an hour or an hour of lead work, be it even in the house. Walking around, sometimes if anyone is a little bit reluctant to want to be with you, take them in I bring them in while I'm doing vegetables. Chuck them a bit of carrot, and all of a sudden they become quite, well, yeah, it's not bad in here. So you can do something. You can always do something. You can work with them. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be walking about with them. You can work with them, but put a lead on, so that they know that that's the attachment.
We've talked a little bit about how the breed has changed over the years. How do you see the development of the breed at the moment? You are a very experienced judge. You've judged worldwide and you've seen trends come and go. What is your current view on this? Let's start with the UK. Would you say there are any particular trends? Or are we jogging along more or less the same way?
No, I think we still have people who can recognise a good, solid Labrador. I also think we now are in the changing era of people who take an awful lot of notice of what is published as their idea of breeding, i.e. by our kennel clubs. Various journalists in papers recommend so much of this outcross breeding. The world is a small place now. People are using far more dogs from abroad. I think the danger of that is you don't know what you're getting into. You will find out, there's no doubt about it, you will find out. I feel that we're at a crossroads, a big crossroads in breeding. We don't have a format anymore. Nobody follows their peers. I followed my peers. But nobody's doing that now. We have all the advice given to us from the scientists and the vets. And our vets are not breeders, not many of them. And we have an awful lot of input from our veterinary profession, which is very useful as long as you know where you're going. But if you allow it to sort of shape your view, then that perhaps can be difficult for you to follow.
American dogs have a far greater influence on the breed worldwide than ever before. Please tell us a little how you see this.
I like the American dogs very much in America. I love the American dogs. I really do. I just love them. I've seen them. They put them on tables. They bring them out in their women, and they hairbrush their dogs. They really give them a really good. It's wonderful. They bring them in, and the coats are all stood up like they have. They're very good. Usually they can be quite hefty. But they're not. I tell you what, they do have. They have wonderful coats and tails. By and large, they got fabulous coats and tails. They haven't lost that. In fact, they are wonderful. The Canadian chocolates are marvellous for coats and tails. I found the best chocolates in Canada, which I didn't expect to find. They weren't wonderful specimens, but they were cracking coats and tails. They really were. So I say that, yeah, the American dogs are wonderful in America.
I think we have a picture here. Could we? You've selected 4 pictures of dogs, and you call them American type. It could be an interesting analysis. Tell us a little bit. Why do you think these dogs are American in type?
Well, that one is much more. This dog, Devonshire's London edition, who has been stud in England for a long time now, and he's done a lot of good work. Beautiful puppies have come out, but the dog himself, in my opinion, is not American type. He's been bred in America, but he looks as though he could live in Europe.
What sets him apart from the other dogs?
He's much lighter in frame. He's a bit longer, and he's lighter in frame. He's gotten far more daylight underneath. This dog here is so deep. I know he's in grass, but he's so deep, and he's got so little upper arm. He's got a wonderful sort of rib, terrific back end, wonderful top line and tail. To me, he's just the epitome of an American dog. He's a hefty dog.
Is it shortness of leg, or is it too strong a dog?
I just think he's got too much body for the length of leg, and I just don't know whether this dog would look different if it was reared differently, or if it was exercised.
Is it his lack of length of leg, or his overly deep body that you object to?
I think it's the depth of the body. I think. Because he's got a lovely short hop, he's got a wonderful back end. I mean, there's a lot to like about the dog, a lot to like. The same with that dog, that's a hefty dog. The lady who was somebody was staying with, you were staying with?
Sally Bell.
Pauline Mortier. She had a lovely dog. He's done a lot of good signing.
Martingale,
Liverline Martingale. That dog, I judged, and he was just far too much for me. David judged the same dog, and he thought he was a good dog. So it's very much down to your own personal preference. But I felt that the dog was far too much for me. But I have seen that he's been a very successful signer.
Would you say that the American dogs now play quite an important part in the modern show-type Labrador, more so than previously? I mean,
yes, and I regret it. I think that people will come to regret that.
Good. I didn't quite hear that. Well, I did say before, I love the American dogs in America. I do believe that everything in America is imported to Europe, isn't it? Everything. And we're the first port of call. Poor old England is the first port of call for everything American. We get it first. We get it a week after America, you get it a month after us. And it's that sort of syndrome. I have no problem with the American dogs. There's so many of them. The bloodlines are so diverse from ours, and I don't see any objection to bringing an American dog in to open your bloodline out. I think that's a good idea, as long as you've got the blood to go back into. And do what Dee Dee Hepworth did, and Gwen Broadley. They went out, for it to do a job.
But then they went straight back in to their bloodlines, their own bloodlines, and they did the job. We used Aspen and we used silver suede back into our own bloodline. For us it worked fairly well. And I personally have got a bitch in out of one of our homebred bitches by an American dog. And she's lovely. She's taken our type, if you like, taking the type after her mother. But how she'll breed on, but the idea is, whether it works or not, which we'll all find out, is to breed her straight back into our stud dogs. Then if one stud dog don't do it, maybe the first time, maybe we try another one. But tightly bred, very tightly bred.
We've just put on this picture of your new litter born in May.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Talking about breeding consistently. Please.
Okay. Wow, yeah, okay.
Could you give us your thoughts on this yourself?
Yes, well, if I tell you that this bitch softly spoken by Old Smoky. Old Smoky did his best work on Whiskey Mac bitches. Now, we have here an Old Smoky bitch. Lovely, this softly spoken bitch. We ought to have done more with it. It did get a reserve ticket, but we didn't do anything with her. And we had semen put down from Whiskey Mac. So we very cleverly decided, well, Smoky went on to the Mac bitches, we'll do Mac onto this Smoky bitch. So we did. And we got this bitch, we had 6 puppies born, but only 2 living. We did the AI, and we got this bitch Times Past. Now, Times, and we got her sister, Legacy. Legacy is a small bitch, not very big. She's quite nicely made. She really wasn't, in my opinion, big enough and strong enough to be the brood I want. So I gave her to some friends in Scotland. Times Past grew and grew. She's a big girl. She very much resembles Whiskey Mac now. Very much. She's a tall bitch. She's very much like her father in head. Quite a strong head for a bitch. And I wanted to use state occasion on her, to be honest. That was the ultimate. If we could put her straight into state occasion, we thought that would be, because we knew more or less how he sires and what we thought he would bring to the table mated to her. Anyway, that was not to be because state occasion mated her, but she missed. So then we used Old Punch, the son. And I feel that we now are bringing, well, we brought Mac into back, that's Acorn and Pretentious, right back up to the front of the pedigree, which, I mean, he's well into the pedigree behind everything else, Old Smoky and Spun Silk, so, and Tiara. So we've tried to bring, as Hawken was saying, Back to the Future. We've tried to bring him back. Now, I don't know, I did say years ago, I don't know what, well, I did say actually when we were doing the AI on Whisper, as we called her, softly spoken, we called her Whisper. When we were mating Whisper, I said, I don't know what the heck we're doing this for, it's ridiculous. It's costing an absolute fortune to do. And, you know, why would you want to breed 2 old dead dogs? Because the old dead dogs probably wouldn't win now anyway, and do you really want to do that? Well, time is going to tell, isn't it? Because we now have the progeny of the old dead dog, daughter, and we put into the new young pretender. So we'll see, and we'll see. At the moment, I'm pleased. At the moment, I'm pleased. But we'll see whether it works or not.
You have been connected with so many top-class Labradors over the long period of time you've been connected with the breed. Tell us, do you still have any unfulfilled ambitions?
I do. Oh, I have lots. I've got to live for another 20 years. I desperately would like to make up a black. I've had lovely blacks and never got there. Some of the blacks I haven't given the proper justice to, so I need to amend that in my head. So I'd love to make up a black, and I'd really like to get to be known. I'm known for yellows. I know you all think I only have, a lot of people think I only have yellows. It's not what I want. I really, really would like to be known for good blacks. So I haven't got much years to keep cracking at it, to keep the blacks. But I can assure you I'm still trying.
And one of the last questions is, Rocheby is of course synonymous with top-class Labradors of a certain type. How would you define the Rocheby type? What sets the Rocheby dogs apart from other Labradors? Many judges of Labradors can spot Rocheby type at a glance. What qualities do they have that others perhaps miss?
So you ought to ask them, really. When we produce the popcorn Royal Oak litter, we managed to get a head shape that was totally balanced. And you gave Popcorn her cert ticket, you made her up as a very young bitch. That head was very much a feature, I think, of the type of dog she was. And Royal Oak was the same. And I think we've tried to get this balanced head along with David's low hocks, my long front and a top line, and throw a coat in. I don't really know. I think the quality of the dog, I hope it's known for its quality. I hope to see that if it's balanced, it's a quality dog, and you might think it was something to do with Rocheby. If it was that sort of dog, I'd like to think, well, that could be a Rocheby, but I don't know.
When people come to use your stud dogs, which have had an enormous positive influence on the breed, what qualities do you think many people are actually looking for?
A winner. The only thing they want is a winner. And this poor old stud dog, one David, I keep quoting him, but he's very quotable. Her lady came with a bitch, and she said, she came to use Royal Oak, and she said, I've come to use Royal Oak because I really want to improve the head, and she really hasn't got enough bone, and I could do with more coat, and she said, I need really to improve her movement. She's not so good. So David said, do you know what they call this dog? She said, yes, it's Royal Oak. He says, yes, it's not Jesus Christ.
That's hard to beat. Finally, Marion, if you were to give sound advice to newcomers and experienced breeders alike, what would you like to emphasize?
Don't give in. Don't give in. Don't give in to all these tests. If your dog is what you love and it's got something, you can breed it through. You can breed through anything with a Labrador. You really can. Breeding is fast if you want it to be fast. It's just as fast as you want it to be. But breeding is fast. In 5 years, you can change the whole look of a kennel. You can get a whole 2-3 generations through. You really can. So don't give in to other people's ideas. Keep your own ideas. Be true to what you want to do. Be determined. Don't let anybody else tell you what to do. You tell them what to do when they've said that. Go away. I do my own thing. We do what we do here, and we do it as well as you can in the interests of the dog. We only breed. We're passionate about what we do. You know, you are, I'm sure. But we breed because we want to see the next ones come through. What are these going to be like? That's a bit. And I told a young lady she wanted a pup from me, and I said, look, I haven't got anything good enough to show really, it's, you know, make a very nice brood bitch this. Take it and breed with it. So she's taking it and she's flogging it all over the place, showing it. And I said, what is the point of that? Please, for God's sake, do what I say. It really is going to be the most beautiful brood bitch, I'm sure. She's got all the bloodlines you need. Don't have people say things about her that aren't right, or be 3rd out of 4, or that's not what you want. You want to be able to say, this is my foundation bitch. And I had one that didn't look a bit like that. It was a mess. It had no stifle, no head, no anything, and I thought it was magnificent. And we came from that. Lovely. So you do the same. And thank you very much.
What I said to the living proof that determination and skill produces good Labradors, and if we could all, you're an example to us all, and thank you so very much for sharing your expertise with us. Big round of applause.